start diving in, I just want to do a quick plug for our upcoming PAR session, the Presidents and Advisors Retreat. As many of you know, because many of you have been to it, it's May 15th through the 17th this year. It's an opportunity for the advisors and the presidents to come to Fishers, Indiana, to meet at the central office for a weekend of strategic planning and leadership identification and just goal setting for the upcoming semester. It's limited to 20 chapters, so and I think we're at 17 right now. So if you're interested in going, or your chapter president has expressed interest in attending this event, then I would have your chapter president go into Delps Connect and fill out that application. It's only $100 per chapter, so you and the president together only have to pay $100, and that would include your travel, lodging, and food for the weekend. So it's a pretty screaming deal. So I'd encourage, if you haven't signed up yet, to go ahead and sign up. It's a great weekend. A lot of great things are shared afterwards about the change in momentum for their chapter that they experienced after going to this weekend. So if you're able to make it May 15th through the 17th, encourage your chapter president to go online, Delps Connect, fill out that application, and get signed up. And with that little plug being done, I'm going to hand it over to Jack Freeman. Of course, everybody knows Jack. And if you don't know Jack, that means your chapter is doing great things and you don't have a lot of risk. But even if you are doing great things, Jack's a great resource to know. Been in this business for a long time, has probably more passion for the fraternity than anybody I know, except for maybe Jody Danneman. They kind of rival each other. But Jack this evening is going to discuss chapter formals and some of the good, the bad, the ugly that got unveiled to the world after our interfraternal brothers at Sigma Alpha Mu up at University of Michigan decided to destroy a resort they were staying at. So it's a very timely topic as formals are coming around, spring breaks are starting to wrap up. So I'm going to hand it over to Jack so he can help give you some proactive means to combat this behavior prior to it making national news, instead of on the opposite end of that. So Jack, it's all yours.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate that. I don't know if I'm the most passionate. One man's passion is another man's masochism. And as an example, I see Jim Myers with us, and I was 8 hours today in a legal mediation out here in Denver, where at the end of the day, they just stood up and said, "We don't like what we're here, and we're done." Walked out of the conference room, and kind of an 8-hour period of my life that I'll never get back, and I'm sure that I paid handsomely for the pleasure on top of it all. But
I was like that after 30 minutes, Jack.
I remember the biggest part of my job in that one was keeping Jim in the room. But not what we're here to discuss today, fortunately. And I want to use this forum less to talk about the shock and awe and the headlines, although we'll talk a little bit about that, and just kind of more a conversation about what I'm seeing from our Delps over the last couple of years, and then just some pointers that you can give to your officers. I know that speaking to you all, the advisors, you are not at these formals, thankfully. I don't think any of us need to be there. But I think what you can do is have good conversations with them, with our men, because you know they're coming up. You know they're going to go. And the conversation really just needs to be, what can we do on the planning side to negate some of what we're seeing out there? So I'm going to really focus on what I've learned working with our guys. I've titled this The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly just because that's a simple title. I didn't think too much on that. And advancing the slide, I know we've all seen the small bomb that went off in the resort up in Michigan. It's actually a timely conversation because I just saw through the newswire that the charter of Sigma Alpha Mu had been pulled, I believe, by their headquarters. And what you won't get in the news and you won't get on the wire is that this was actually one of their better groups. And I'll reserve judgment about what that says about the rest of their groups. But this was one of their, we would call it Court of Honor, top 20 type chapters. And it just simply was a night that went very, very wrong. I also think that the women are probably getting off on this a little bit easier than they need to. The sorority was Sigma Delta Tau that was up there with them, and I have a feeling they were more than complicit, but our guys were on the invoice, which I will definitely be talking about, and the guys were the hosts. And when that happens, you're the one that's going to get stuck with that. So this was kind of the impetus of having this conversation, is that we just need to make sure that our guys are prepared. Because I think from what I've seen, a lot of what has gone wrong has just been due to the fact that we haven't planned these out very well, and when it goes wrong, it goes real wrong. So in the bad side, what I want to talk about are just some of the experiences that I've had lately with our chapters. I'm going to throw another one that just came to me on the plane out here at the end. So this is a group of 7, and frankly, there are good chapters on here. There are 4 chapters on here, open chapters and closed chapters. But I think what I want to show is that typically in a year we'll have 1 or 2 of these blow up on us. Gamma Sigma at the University of Pittsburgh was a group that just went up to an out-of-town resort-type property they've been to half a dozen times and had a formal, and a couple of their members had destroyed some of the room. And the problem was not so much the aftermath, it was just that they didn't pay on time, and then I got a call, and the school got a call, and that the chapter was suspended, and it was just a big knot to try to have to unravel when we came back. Theta 8 at the University of South Carolina was one of those where they didn't really cause a lot of damage, but they pissed off a lot of people in the hotel. So the neighbors were kept up all night, and we had some people that really did not like college students. And that resulted, as it sometimes does, in a letter to the president of the university. And so we got a big black eye for the University of South Carolina, which led to this fall when they had another strike. They couldn't afford another strike, and we were asked to leave campus. Epsilon Xi at Western Kentucky, they also kind of rented a cabin. They just had a ton of people out on a deck, and the deck collapsed. And what really, they are also closed, but what really got them in a bad spot is they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford to spend $20,000 to build a new deck. So really their programming suffered because all their money for the next year went to go pay this off. An example there. Delta Zeta at the University of Florida really is an example of a chapter that really didn't go so wrong. They just invited the wrong women, and the women went nuts, and to the tune of doing drugs in the bathroom, and at first I didn't believe it. It's awfully convenient to blame your dates, but as I started looking into it, the women really just took advantage of the guys and had a blowout, mostly from the same sorority. It even might have been a swap. I don't completely recall, but the girls can act poorly too, and in fact they often do, and we get stuck with the check. Theta Rho at the University of Dayton is a chapter that had a formal overnight, and if you're not familiar with the University of Dayton, it's a Marianist Catholic institution. And the VP of Student Affairs, who is a sister of the cloth, made a decree that overnight formals are not consistent with the values of a Marianist institution. I can't really argue with that. She's right. She can make that decision. But our guys disagreed, and instead of taking their medicine, what they decided to do was have a formal in Nashville during winter or fall break, because their understanding of the rules was that the rules don't apply when school's not in session. Turns out they were wrong, and ended up being asked to leave campus for a semester. So they knew better, and they wanted to do it anyway. One that I will add to this list that I thought of, Beta Upsilon at the University of Illinois. They are a good example of noise and damage. They ended up occupying a hotel that was being shared by a bunch of parents who had middle school children at a swim meet. And there was nothing more aggravated than a bunch of parents who can't sleep before their gifted child, my quotes, has to go perform in a pool or something. So they all got evicted. Every one of them got thrown out of the hotel at about 2 in the morning. And Jim Meyer can probably comment, there are parts of St. Louis you don't want to be wandering around at 2 in the morning. And one of our guys got mugged. A couple of them got picked up for public intoxication, and a few parents were called to drive 3 hours to pick their sons up from God knows where in Illinois. So we'll talk about kind of why it's important to have a plan and that's a good example in my mind of that. And then I throw on the University of Arizona, not because I like to pick on them, but they had a formal in Vegas in the Playboy Suite, I think in the Palms, that they had to cancel because they had to go through a member review. I had a price tag of $65,000. So nothing really went wrong at that formal. It's just kind of an example of sometimes I think we might need to take a break and say, what are we spending on this and why? While it's probably pretty cool to have a formal with your lady friends in a Playboy Suite, are we really going to commit $65,000 to do that, particularly when they couldn't go? They're pretty angry about that. So I wanted just to go through a few cases. This is not a Sammy problem or another fraternity story.
What's the process, Jack, if I want to change from Beta Beta to University of Arizona?
I did not hear that they were looking for chaperones, but if so, I'll get you in contact with them, because they would probably be willing, if you're willing to pay your portion. But we do have our issues. Ours, thankfully, to this point, have not been as public, but I think it's important at a minimum just to be aware that it can happen to anybody, particularly when you're going overnight involving alcohol and women in hotel rooms. So that's my bad. What I want to talk about, though, is just some things that you can recommend to your guys. These are mostly common sense things, but at the same time, they often don't get said. And as you all know, when you have new officers, new social chairmen, new risk managers, even the best practices tend to get lost. So I'm just going to go through some bullet items that I brainstormed up and just kind of talk about each one of those in turn. I think the first one is by far the most important. Your guys have to have a plan. And what I mean by that is all the way from how are you getting there? How is transportation being managed? How is it being implemented? Ideally, you'd have third-party buses or some form of hired transportation. More realistic is probably just to let the guys know that they are on their own to get there. They are to stay sober, to carpool, to be smart about driving, but they're on their own to get there, and then the fraternity event will begin at such and such a time or a date. Just because I think we've been fairly blessed. We haven't had a lot of accidents to and from formals because usually they are smart enough not to drive or drink until they get there. But I think it's still wise to think about that. The plan: when does the event begin? When does the event end? Particularly when you're renting out a ballroom or something. How is the alcohol being provided? One that I could have put up there that I didn't was Eastern Illinois a number of years back, 7 years back, had a formal, and the seniors just had an open bar and then left the chapter with the tab. And I ended up finding out about that when the hotel got stiffed and then called me for payment. And I asked them what this was for, and they said, well, for the open bar at your formal. So the MRG needs to be intact, and I think that's part of your plan is just sketch the event out, know how it's going to go, think in advance, let people know when you're going to shut it down. I even think that it's probably good to have a time of night when you're shutting the rooms down. Because as we've all seen at conferences, the conference will go till 9, and they'll sit in their rooms and party till 4 in the morning. That's okay until you're next to an old lady who doesn't sleep. So I think that the leadership just needs to have a plan. Think it through, have it written, which kind of leads into my second point. Really, you need to have someone who's in charge. And that who needs to be sober. There needs to be more than one of them. The hotel needs to know who is in charge, because let's just assume that there will be noise complaints, because there almost always are. But identify someone, ideally the president, ideally someone on the executive committee. But if there are problems, who does the hotel call? Because otherwise they're going to call whoever made the reservation, and that person's probably not going to be sober. He's probably not going to be reachable, and then the hotel's going to freak out, call security or police, and then you've got an incident. So I have found, just from my own experience at division conferences, if you sit down at the hotel and give them your plan, at conferences it's always call me. I'll go talk to him first. You can go talk to him second, and then there's no third talking to. They're thrown out. To me, that's always worked at conferences, but just having something that the hotel knows there's someone in charge, there's someone that's going to be responsible for the group. Identify that well in advance and make the men know this is not something you can just change your mind while you're there. If you shirk your duty, that's an honor board. It's really important that we have somebody who is preferably an upperclassman executive committee member who's going to be in charge. Payment and processing payment. This one, I think, if we did nothing else, if we could do this, I think this would help out significantly. Where I see these things often going off the rails is that the chapter calls in and reserves a room block. And either out of convenience or out of lack of organization, they generally leave that entire block of rooms on either under the name of the social chairman or under the chapter name, maybe the name of the chapter president. And what happens is you've got a bunch of guys, a lot of times seniors, that feel, I'm not paying for this room. So they don't have much invested in if it gets damaged, if there's a noise complaint, or if there's problems. So I as strongly recommend as I can recommend, make individuals reserve their own rooms. So that if someone demolishes a room, it's on them. If someone gets into trouble or gets evicted, it's on them. It doesn't come back to the chapter to try to have to collect or put the chapter on the hook for a significant amount of damage. Now, the chapter's probably still going to be on the hook if you're damaging common areas, but at least if we can limit it to the rooms, I think that prevents a lot, and I think it reinforces the fact that people are accountable for their own actions. It also helps them control who comes in and out of their room. A number of times, once you leave the property, particularly if they're seniors and we're a month from graduation, they're not going to pay. And the chapter's going to have to pay for it anyway. So transfer that over to the individual to make him personally accountable. I think that the expectations to the membership are important. I think you need to have, at the meeting before you go, here are our expectations of you all. The MRG is still in place. This is not a vacation from the risk management policy. Our expectation, you are out and about, you are reflecting both on Gamma Kappa or Beta Omicron or Iota Omicron. You are representing Delts, and you're representing Babson Delts or Penn State Delts or Ohio State Delts. So understand that, and you'll be held accountable to that. Make sure that they understand they're also accountable for their dates. So if you invite a train wreck to come along, that's your train wreck. And you are responsible for whoever you decide to bring along. And usually these formals, it's a date. We don't usually have people bringing their friends to these things, but they need to know that. But I think it'd be helpful as the advisor to sit down with them, with the executive committee, and just say, what are your expectations? Because ultimately it'll be the president's headache if this goes south. We talked about transportation. Certainly I prefer a third-party hired transportation vendor if you can swing it. If not, make it an understanding they have to get there. I do think that if you are headquartered up at a hotel, and let's say you're going on a riverboat cruise, which happens, or you're going downtown to a train station, or you're renting out something, if you're going to have transportation from the hotel to another location and then back to the hotel, I'm going to highly, highly recommend some sort of bus, because they're going to drink at the hotel before they go, particularly the ones who are underage. They're going to load up, and they're going to drink down there as well, and then they're going to come back. I don't think it's very responsible to expect them to find their own sober designated brothers or however they want to play it and go back and forth. I just think it'll break down, and I think it's irresponsible. So pay a little bit more and get that. If you're going to a city where you've got those options, they're going to have a bus as long as you're looking far enough in advance. We talked about the MRG. It does apply even when you cross state lines. So make sure that you follow that. The sexual assault considerations, that's a tough one. By the nature of these formals, the idea is that you invite a young lady or young man, I don't know, whatever your persuasion might be, and you're going to go overnight with that individual for the weekend. to me, that opens up a lot of interesting messages where you've got hotel rooms, you've got people, and believe me, the students these days are a little bit more liberal with their morals even than they were a decade ago when I was in college. But still, I think that's a potentially really uncomfortable situation if you're a freshman co-ed and you are asked to stay and you don't really want to do anything with this guy and he's all sorts of drunk and then you've got to stay in the hotel room with him. Understand that that men are scrutinized to a higher degree than they ever have been in these situations. If everyone's drinking, no one can give consent, and just be really careful. I don't know if there's a good risk mitigation strategy, maybe other than make sure you are paired up. It lessens the cost, and you've got another set of eyes in that room potentially. That could be a bad thing as well. But I think we just need to reinforce the message and say, guys, you do not have gray area. If she feels uncomfortable and she reports you, your life is fundamentally changed, and her life is fundamentally changed. That's the world we live in. Be smart about it. Be smart about your date. Be smart about what you do with your date, because I just think that the opportunity is there for this to go really bad, and I don't want it to get there. I actually talked about this whole topic with our claims adjuster on the car out to the airport, and she said, "Why don't you guys just forbid it? Why don't you just forbid these formals?" And I said, that's not really our philosophy. I don't believe in just forbidding everything that might cause us problems in the fraternity. I think part of the magic of fraternity is these guys learn to develop some judgment, learn to develop some accountability and ownership, and I think they need to learn how to maturely manage this situation. That said, if we get a whole bunch of sexual assault claims, one on top of another, due to spring formals, we might have to go there anyway, but I don't want to. I think we can properly manage this. I think as advisors, you can give them good insight and information, and I think we can manage this. We've been doing overnight formals for half a century in one way or another, so I think it's possible to do this well. We just need to follow a plan, understand the expectations, employ some best practices, and just be gentlemen with it. So that wraps up really into that final bullet point, which is it worth it? I think it is. I want these guys to have fun. That's why you're in a fraternity. You are in the fraternity to have fun, to make lasting memories and relationships. And I want to support that. But there may come a point where I can't, or there may come a point where I don't even get the choice. But I think if we use an ounce of prevention on the front end to help just plan these events well, I think we can. We're always going to have noise complaints. We're always going to have individuals who are frustrated that they're sharing a hotel with a fraternity, but I think we can keep the blow-ups, the $400,000 hotel bill that the Sammys up in Michigan are experiencing. I think we can limit that. I really do. So it's my intent to try to provide you all with some information that you can take back to your groups and say, let's talk this through, let's have a plan, let's have a conversation. Because ultimately, I don't want to be in a point where the fraternity has to add another line to the MRG that says social events occurring overnight are no longer allowed. Don't want to do it. I don't think we need to do it. So with that, we are right at 30 minutes, and those are my thoughts on spring chapter formals. But part of this also from the men are on this call, I'm curious, I'm looking at the list. A lot of you, almost all of you, are experienced and have been doing this for a number of years. And I'd be interested to get your take, too, of particular issues that you have trouble resolving with these overnight formals or overnight events, or best practices that you've employed that I did not list, because I think there's a wealth of experience out there, too, for you guys. So I want to make sure we open it up for any conversation or discussion.
So, Jack, this is Jim. The sexual assault thing is top of mind for me right now, for not that we have an issue that I know of, but on campus right now within the community at Mizzou, it is a huge deal. And they're actually talking about putting in a whole set of rules now within the IFC. Like, there's actually been suggestion of having like no women in the rooms, and like dorm hours where you have to have all the women out by midnight. I mean, some really over-the-top stuff, all due to the whole Title IX and sexual assault stuff. And so, it is top of mind.
Are you talking about just in general, the fraternity housing?
Yeah, in general. Just all due to this whole UVA article.
Absolutely. Well, and Mizzou is in a special case. I'll single it out because Mizzou's on Michael Bonnicum at Boston, you're on the same list, but those are two schools that are on the Office of Civil Rights watch list. Mizzou, of course, very publicly had an individual who committed suicide after she'd alleged she'd been sexually assaulted by a football player, and then alleged that had more or less been covered up. So they are anal to a degree that we have not really seen before. So I'm not surprised, and the students at the On the Ice are getting a lot of pressure. A lot of that, in my opinion, Jim, is window dressing. I'm not sure exactly what that does to fix the problem other than show that you're doing something about it.
For me, it exacerbates the problem. I mean, if they start putting rules in like that, I'll never have any seniors or upperclassmen live in the house. Yeah. I already have a problem with that. And in my mind, the younger, squirrelier guys living in the house will be a problem, right? So, second, just question regarding formals is, our guys are planning such expensive things anymore. It's almost becoming a two-tier system. And so it's not a behavior thing, but it's more of an inclusion type of issue. And for me, that kind of ruins the experience. And I've had to talk to them about it, and they're not really buying into that. But we're not having full participation because they're so expensive. So a lot of the guys just can't go.
I have not run into that. I do know what you're talking about, and that it does become an arms race when you hear that Sigma Chi went down to the boats and rented out a riverboat for the night. Well, that's really cool. What can we do to one-up that? And the girls talk. They say, well, at Beta, this is what we did. And so I think it's interesting. I think that's a good conversation just to gently challenge with your men and say, if you guys are having a formal and you're a chapter of 130, but only 40 of the guys are going, is that what you're trying to accomplish? Is that worth it? That's kind of what we talked about.
So now that we're at 152, they figure if they get 75 guys, 80 guys, that's 160. That's a pretty good party.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, the best formal would be one where there'd be 100% of the guys there, right?
You would think. That's kind of the intent. The last send-off for the seniors, and it's nice to have everybody there. And I think that's just a good conversation, perhaps.
Make fun of the guy named Jack from Nebraska who had the date that wasn't so cute.
She was from Missouri, so that's why.
Exactly.
But yeah, those are good conversations to have with your men. Are they gonna pick you up on it, and are they gonna change what they're doing? Maybe, maybe not. But I think they at least need to hear it. I think that's the kind of higher level thought that an advisor can bring that those guys are probably not going to come up with on their own.
Jack, this is Jeff Pelletier at Ohio State. A couple of things to add on to the comments that were just shared. One of the other issues chapters probably don't realize that they're facing in an off-site excursion or an overnight excursion is what to do with same-sex couples in their chapter. I mentioned that somewhat casually at the exec retreat, and it was like a light bulb went off over all of their heads when they realized that there may be men in their chapter who are necessarily excluded from bringing their date because of what the social norms might be in the chapter and not wanting to exacerbate that with an overnight event. So I think there's some conversation around some of those topics. What was interesting to me is that it was the exec officers who really wanted to take the lead in opening that discussion so that it's not something that, as the advisor, I am forcing upon the chapter or bringing up. I think in general, all of these topics, your point about working with the exec board is right on, and then having that message delivered by the undergraduates as opposed to making it sound like it's coming down from on high from the chapter advisor, and just making sure that they're enforcing your message in the right way. And then I think the other point, I don't know if you touched on it or not, is just kind of what is their discussion around what they're sharing via social media at these events or leading up to or following those events. Even just posting pictures on Facebook or even just a status update can really send them down a bad path, as we have seen recently.
Yeah, that's a really good point, kind of to piggyback a little bit off of what we're seeing with KDR and Penn State. That is an extreme, and there is some deviant behavior there that goes beyond social media. But
Right.
I think that's part of when you have that conversation, when as you had said, Jeff, you talk to the executive committee, and then they deliver the message. I think that's part of the expectation that they need to set. Be smart on social media. Understand what you're putting out there will be viewed. I joke about the students down at Dayton who thought they were going to be all smart and go on a when school wasn't. They were outed by the fact that there were 60 sorority girls who put how much fun they had at the Delta Forum all over Facebook. And I don't know how exactly Greek life caught on, but they did. So to me, that's kind of a sobering moment for our guys. Even guys, I know that you've all got your minds in the right place. Do you feel 100% confident that you are going to be able to limit your date who you might not know and what she puts on Facebook or Twitter? And that whole, again, is just another, here are our expectations, and here's what's going to happen if we deviate from those. But definitely the social media, I think, is wise of, in addition, what sort of image are we putting out there? What are we doing with our chapter brand? Are we helping or are we hurting it?
I think the conversation that I tend to have with a lot of students, and not just the guys in the fraternity, when it revolves around social media, is not necessarily a matter of whether or not to post whatever it is that you're about to say or about to do, but really questioning, is that the right thing to be saying or doing in the first place? So setting aside for a minute whether or not you should be sharing it as broadly as you can is whether or not that is the activity that should be taking place in the first place. And I'm quick to tell them that I understand that that's a challenge. And if I was a college student today, there's very little doubt that I would have gotten in a lot more trouble, given my involvement with social media and the fact that my roommates and I were idiots just the same way they are. But it's about, making some smart decisions and kind of stopping before it's a problem.
Great point, Jeff. Jeff's just a lot more socially aware as far as social media than I am. So I appreciate you bringing it, because that's a weakness.
Jeff and I are Facebook friends.
Absolutely.
Jeff can teach you how to tweet, Jim. I kind of want to see Jim Meyer tweets.
I'll learn to tweet. I'm not going to learn to twerk.
Hey, Jack.
We're all happy about that.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Jack, Jason Milligan from Ohio Wesleyan. I want to get back to your point about the event planning portion of this and the chapter president or the social chair sitting down with the venue, whether it be a hotel or a party house of some sort. But from a hotel, especially if the members are staying overnight, obviously the hotel doesn't want to have the problems that you spoke about earlier, either with conflicting agendas from their patrons, some of whom need to get to bed early and some of whom want to stay up till 4 a.m. So I think back to the idea of having a plan and talking it out with the venue general manager, I think is a huge, just that step alone can have a huge impact on both making sure that the general manager of that hotel or the manager of that hotel is understanding the point and the type of activity that's being planned for their hotel and the type of event, and then they could probably make suggestions about things like outsourced vendors for alcohol if that's available through their services, or some sort of extra help in terms of security or monitoring. They may provide that for a fee as well. That would be helpful perhaps in terms of keeping incidents at a minimum, and then also not placing other patrons around that may be sensitive to folks who want to stay up past midnight. So I think that may be a big piece of it, is just the proper planning and risk mitigation piece of it that our folks need to be a little more attentive to in the pre-planning, and I think that's probably where a lot of this fails.
I think that is a great point, and one that I kind of thought about making too, of sitting down early and talking about your block. Where is it? Is there a way that we can reserve our block kind of to one floor or one area or one wing? Because that'll help. Believe me, the hotel management just wants to have little conflict, and if you can help them on that, I think you're well ahead. And Jason, I think you made a great point about it. And then leverage that responsibility to getting better leads on vendors, whether it's transportation or security. They do this all the time. They're going to be able to help you out, particularly if you're going to a town or city you might not be the most familiar with.
Right.
So,
it's not the first time they've hosted a kind of a wild wedding reception, which ostensibly a formal ends up looking like at the end of the evening. It's kind of a lot of people in tuxes and dresses having a good time, and that's what they do all the time with weddings and such. But the hotel people can be a big source of help in terms of managing the event itself, and I think that's a resource we rarely, as chapter, as an undergrad, I wouldn't have ever thought of it, but having done a lot of that stuff as an adult and planned events, it's one of the things that you can certainly reach out and get some help with.
Great point. It's just communication. As we all know, if they know who they're dealing with, they're going to have a better relationship. So, and if you do one of these, if you're a chapter that does one of these every year and you've done this for 5-10 years, you're going to have problems. You're going to have one guy that's an idiot. You're going to have one guy that drinks too much. But I think that the hotel just appreciates knowing who they can call, who's going to take care of it, and then seeing it getting taken care of. That's a good point. Anyone else for just the good of the cause on this topic? I want to make sure we share ideas as best that we can. Well, Alan, with that then, with the silence, I think we're tapped out. But then before I hand it back over to you and you can kind of close this up and put a bow on it, what I do want to make sure that, again, I want these to happen because I think these are memorable events. I think the guys get a lot out of it. I think this is one of those cool things of being in a fraternity that you can't do if you just live in an apartment with 4 dudes. You're not going to rent out a facility and get all dressed up and have kind of one of these big memorable nights if you're just a guy living off campus. So these are the sorts of things that I think add value to the membership. We just need to make sure that they remain positive. And I think with planning, I think with just proper expectations, forethought, I can't even begin to tell you just how better these things go if you plan them. Seems obvious, but with our guys, it's not always. And I want to be able to say that we're proud of these events. These are part of what being adult is. This is a good aspect of membership. Where I don't want to get is to a point where we have to have a difficult conversation with the Arts chapter and kind of the risk management team and understand and make a decision. I guess we can't do these anymore because they're just harming us more than they're helping us. We're not there. I think if we do some of these things, we won't get there. And I appreciate all the time and energy that you guys spend fighting little battles like this week in and week out. So, Alan, back to you if you'd like to close us up for the night.
I just want to say thank you to everybody for their attendance. A big thank you to Jack for facilitating this conversation. I think this is a conversation that needs to go on in every chapter that we have. The more that you talk with other advisors and you can share some of these messages, the better our fraternity is going to be as a whole. So thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for the questions. And we will have another and I don't have a slide for it. I apologize. We're going to have another webinar, the last one of the academic year, next month. It's on the third Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern. I believe it is on summer preparations for a outstanding fall, but I have to double check that. So with that, thank you everybody for coming. And if you have questions afterwards, feel free to email myself or Jack, and we'll get you the answers that you're looking for. But have a great evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Behave out there, Jack.
Do my best.
Bye-bye.